Okay, we're going now. Okay. Today is December 21st, 2020. My name is Joe Todd. This is an interview with Josh Morrison in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Sir, where were you born?
Clinton, Oklahoma.
Clinton, Oklahoma. When's your birthday?
April 26, 1984.
April 26th.
1984, yes, sir.
Who was your father?
George Sean Morrison.
And your mother?
Karen Godin.
Okay,
G-O-D-I-N.
Okay, G-O-D-I-N.
That's her maiden name, yes.
Okay. Did you go through school in Clinton?
No, I never even went to school in Clinton. I was born there during the boom in the 1980s. My dad worked for Helmerich and Payne, and I was born out there. Okay. So I went to school in, I went to elementary school in Ava, Missouri, and then I went to junior high and some elementary in Wilburton, Oklahoma, and then I went to high school in Halls, Tennessee, and graduated from there, and that's where I joined the military from.
Why did the family move so much?
My mom was a single mother, and she struggled to find work, and she, finally settled down in Tennessee, and yeah, but she was a single mom. And
Okay. Who was your favorite teacher?
My English teacher from high school, my 10th grade English teacher, Miss Strong. She was a really nice lady, and I wasn't very good at school, and she forced me to learn, and I owe a lot of her, and I'm a very good writer now, or I'd like to think I am, but I owe that to her. She really pressed it into me, even though I really didn't want to learn to write. I mean, grammar is good.
What year did you graduate high school?
2002.
2002. I'm sorry, again, from what high school?
Halls High School in Halls, Tennessee.
Okay, Halls, Tennessee. What did you do after high school?
I went straight to the military.
Okay.
I graduated in May, and within a month I was in Fort Benning at 30th AG.
Why did you join the Army or the Navy, Marines, or Air Force?
I was already flirting with the idea when I was in high school. There was not a lot to do in a small town, so it's either, get really good grades and go to college, or go to the military, follow lineage. And then 9/11 happened when I was a senior in high school, and I signed up for the delayed entry program shortly thereafter.
Okay. And you went to, when did you go on active duty?
June 17th. June 18th, actually.
Of 2000?
2002, yes, sir.
And Fort Benning for basic training?
Yes, sir. From June till October 11th, I believe, was the day I graduated.
Okay. Tell me about basic.
Basic was interesting. I went to basic training when it was still an all-male combat arms. They hadn't integrated women into any of the combat arms. It was 14 weeks, 3 days of OSET training, 1 station unit training. It was an interesting experience. We did a lot of road marching. We did a 2, a 4, 6, a 8, a 10, 12, 15, and a 25-mile bayonet for the culmination. Basic training taught me a lot about life, because they broke us down, and I had Drill Sergeant Johnson, I had Sergeant First Class Johnson, I had Staff Sergeant Diss, and Staff Sergeant Holdaway, and they were...
Those are their names again?
Sergeant First Class Johnson, Staff Sergeant Disk, and Staff Sergeant Holdaway were my drill sergeants. And I was in Foxtrot 219, 2nd Platoon. And actually, I was in my platoon. We had a lot of Oklahoma National Guard people that were there. There was a couple people from New York. There was some from California. And I went in on a uncommitted contract, so I didn't know where I was going until about 3/4 of the way through basic training, and then they sent us all to either the 1st Armored Division. They sent most of us to the 1st Armored Division or the 1st Infantry Division in Germany, and unless the other ones had like contracts to go somewhere. I actually was in basic training with a good friend of mine, Jacob Shute. He lives in western Missouri, and me and him went to basic training together. We went to our units together, and we deployed together. We rode in the same Bradley together.
What's his name again?
Jacob Shute.
Okay.
He's from Weston, Missouri, right outside of Kansas City.
Okay.
He's a really good friend of mine. I met a lot of good people there. Me and him stayed together for a while, and then we had another guy that he went to, I think, headquarters platoon, but basic training, back to basic training. It was good. It was tough. It was hot in Fort Benning. It really was. But my hardest road march was my 2-mile road march compared to my other ones, because I'd never road marched before. And we had some studs in our cadre were good, and we were at a time of war. We'd already been into Afghanistan. We hadn't been into Iraq yet. So most of us knew we were all going to be deployed at some point in time. And that sat well with us, I guess, for the most part. It really, basic training was a good experience. Sand Hill was a good experience. That's pretty much basic.
What's your best memory of basic?
It's actually pretty funny. I was on fire guard, and I didn't change out of my PTs and threw my BDU top on, and the drill sergeant come in and caught me, and boy, I had to do push-ups on the parade field the next morning. But I didn't have my boots tied, and you're an 18-year-old kid and you're sleepy. You know what I mean? You don't want to wake up but I do remember that I got smoked out there in front of the entire platoon. But that was funny. The bayonet was an experience because we did our 15-mile road march out there, and we done our field training exercise. We dug our hasty fox holes, and our mortar platoon, they dug their, we were surrounded, our mortar platoon, our headquarters company, and we dug in. The drill sergeants were always in the cadre, were always, they kept us sleep deprived, and they were always trying to come in on our lines, and it was just that for a week. And then you get on the bayonet, and I believe it was 25 or almost 26 miles in 20 something hours. You carry ammo cans for a certain period. I remember climbing a cliff with a rope, and it's just this dirt cliff that's like, when I equate it to the Rangers when they climbed the cliff in D-Day, when they did that, I equate that training to that, because all of us infantry, we always had our training in the same place, and they paved the way for our battle drills, put it that way. And I equated that to that, but you're full rucked up, and it was it looked big, but I probably wasn't 50 feet, but it was still tough when you're straight up and down and you're rucked up and you're tired, your feet hurt, you've been marching, and it was a grueling experience. But then you march up onto Honor Hill, and you drink out of that grog, and it's dark, and then you have people that come and talk.
Drink out of the grog?
A grog on Honor Hill. It's at this, you march. It's the end. It's the culmination of your bayonet. I'm not even sure if they do the bayonet anymore. It's pretty dangerous. It was, but it was a good training experience. I'm not going to doubt that.
Yeah.
But it's, you march up onto Honor Hill, and they got a grog there, and you drink out of your canteen cup out of it, and it's a humbling experience because in the infantry you turn blue. Turning blue is when they pin your disc, your blue disc on your MOS, and then you get your blue cross and your blue cord, and it's an experience because you're exhausted, and you're so exhausted, but it's over. And then you march, and you get to go and eat steaks and watch TV, and they fed us good, but it was over, but it was tough, it wasn't like Army basic training. I remember graduating basic training at the end of the 9 weeks, and they said, "You're graduated basic training, nothing's going to change. You're welcome to another 5 more weeks."
What impressed you about your drill instructors?
They were young, they were high speed. Drill Sergeant Disk was the most mild-mannered person that I'd ever encountered in my life. He was like 25 or 26 years old, Staff Sergeant Ranger Tab, run 2 miles in like 10, 11 minutes, just do push-ups, push posts to the sea, just sit-ups, flutter kicks. I remember doing flutter kicks like you ain't got no business.
What are flutter kicks?
Where you lay on your back and your feet are 6 inches off the ground and you just kick your legs like this. And I remember I think it was our 12-mile road march, and then we come in and we laid on the ground and we all did cause something or other. It's just impossible task. And this is another good memory, but we did, I think, like 10,000 of them, like it seemed like forever to where your legs are just like, you can't even lift them and straighten them out. And that was an experience too. I do remember.
What's his last name?
Drill Sergeant Disque, Disque.
Okay.
Yes. Drill Sergeant Holdaway, he used to chew sunflower seeds. I remember that because we'd be doing push-ups, and he would always say, "It behooves you soldiers to do things." It always behooves us to do things, and he'd be spitting sunflower seeds everywhere. And he was so fast. He was one of the fastest runners I've ever seen in my entire life. But they tag teamed us when somebody left a rifle. This is another good experience. Somebody left a sensitive item rifle out there. So we went hands across Fort Benning, holding hands and walking in a line to find this weapon. And what it was they woke us up in the middle, but they told us you always run your weapon through your belt in case we tie it to you, wrap your hands around it. Well, we got up in a rush and somebody walked off without the rifle. And then they got caught, then we did that, and then they ensued on, we called it smoking. I'm sure it's the same thing, but they smoked us for 3 weeks straight. I mean, day in and day out. They doubled our fire guards, but it was, like I said, it was a good experience. It taught us teamwork, and, it put strife in there, but it also put the foundations to handle that strife in a platoon and a team manner, and it built us stronger, I believe.
Did you find the weapon?
Yes, we did. Yes, of course we did. It did not take long. That was a one-day thing. We wasn't leaving the field until we did.
Let me back up. What was your reaction on 9/11?
I was shocked. I was in first period. I can't remember his class. I remember the teacher's name was Coach Jared. He was our basketball coach, and he taught, I like to say it was some kind of civics class or some of that likeness. But I was there, and we used to watch Channel 1 News when we got to school, and it would show for like 10 or 15 minutes, and then we watched it, and it was a school thing. And then we were in class, and they turned on the TVs, I think they came over the intercom, and they turned on the TVs, and when the first plane hit, and I didn't think it was real at first. I thought it was a movie, and then it was real when the next one flew into it, and then it got real, like, strange. It was nostalgic, like, the entire, like, I don't think the school let out, but they pretty much just said, if you want to go home, like, we were attacked, we didn't know what to think, and we didn't even know about when the Pentagon got hit. We had just watched the World Trade Centers, and it was a sobering experience. I wanted retribution for it. I did. I wanted to. The only thing I can attest to is, when, like, even though when the Japanese flew into Pearl Harbor, it was one of them hits, except I wasn't there, and I've never even been to New York. I've been to Newark, and but it was a profound experience. We'd been attacked on our own soil, and heinously attacked from civilians. And out of my small town, like, there was like 60 or 70 of us that graduated, and probably 10 or 12 of us joined the military. Like, that's what we did. I left before most people took their summer off after high school. I wanted to go, and plus my mom was stern, and she was like, you're graduating high school, either you pay bills or you get out. And I was like, okay, I'm going to the military. And she she of course cried when she signed the papers because I was 17 when I signed up.
What was your instructor's name? And the teacher?
Mrs. Strong.
No, the one on 9/11. You said.
Oh, Coach Jarrett, Jarrret.
Okay.
I think it, or J-E, yeah, Coach Jarrett.
Okay. So after basic training, where'd you go?
I went home on leave for 30 days, and then I actually flew and I landed in Germany on Veterans Day. And I remember when we stepped off we flew on a civilian aircraft, and we had to stay at it wasn't Ramstein, it was Frankfurt, and then they have a military thing there. And I remember Germany, I thought, wow, the fall, it rained so much because I stepped off the plane and there was standing water. We walked out and there was standing water everywhere, and it was just pouring down rain, and I thought, man, that's a lot of water. And
you left from what port? What airport?
I left from Atlanta, Georgia. I flew out of Atlanta. I took a Greyhound bus from Fort Smith, Arkansas to Atlanta, Georgia. I stayed the night in a hotel, and then I flew out the next morning.
When you're getting on the airplane heading out, what were you thinking?
It was my first flight, and I was on a DC-10, and I was actually sitting next to a guy. He was actually killed later on. His name was Private First Class Clint Langbear. His grandfather was a wind talker, and we were in basic training together. And
what was his name?
Clint Langbear,
Okay.
Lambear.
Okay.
Yeah, and we sat next to each other. And it's a horrible tragedy, but when he was in Germany at his unit, he got killed by two soldiers. They beat him to death robbed his money and tried to flush his ID card down the toilet. It was horrible. It was it shocked us, because we were kids, and then we were at war, and then that happens, and we weren't in the same platoon, but we were in the same company. And I sat next to him on the plane ride home, and and you never know when this is the last time you'll see somebody, and the way that it happened, it was a tragedy. It was, and they caught them both. They did. I mean, they beat him, robbed him for like €40, which is like $40, just in Frankfurt. But that was my first plane ride, and it was fun because I still I got butterflies when I flew up, and I've never got them again, even though I've flown so many times. And I got a window seat, and I was looking out there, and I didn't sleep the whole time because it was my first plane ride, and I was like, it was fun. And then we landed in Germany, and we'd already knew I was going to Baumholder. They called it the Rock, and a lot of people have been stationed at Baumholder. We were one of the largest posts with combat troops outside the United States. There was 2 infantry battalions, field artillery battalion, engineers. It was constantly like, we were in the Bavarian Alps, and there was a lot of wild hogs. And it was like we were in the foothills of it, and there was so much fog. I remember the fog. And our buildings were World War II barracks because I don't know, it might be a myth, but they said that the reason why is that they're still standing is because we couldn't bomb them because of the cloud cover, and it was nestled off in the middle of, it's about an hour from Ramstein, which is Ramstein Air Force Base, and one of the largest Air Force bases. And it's cold, it's rainy. But I wasn't really there a lot. I got there in November, and we got orders to go to Kuwait, and I believe it was January. I might be mistaken because I remember having to clean our equipment, to go, and we were in the motor pool, and my company actually got deployed before the rest of the division. We were.
What did you do in Germany?
What do you mean, what did I do?
You were there for 2 months.
I went to, we had a week or a 2-week integration thing to where you learn about, they teach you a little bit of German, they teach you how to count, and And then you go, and we went to a town called Trier, which there's a church in Trier that's super, super old. It's got the Torin Shroud, I believe is what it is, and they only open it every. But we went in and we went down in the catacombs, and we drank this stuff called ice wine, which is it's and glue vine. It's warm wine, and we went to this restaurant, and you have to. It was part of our class, and you have to order your food in German. So, and everything's in German, and I remember ordering duck, and it was and it was phenomenal. I don't even remember the restaurant, but it was part of our, and it was right at Christmas time, and everything was, or in between, I think it was in between Thanksgiving or right before Thanksgiving, right around that time, and it was fun. And then, other than that, we got our barracks room, and we were 18-year-old kids in Europe, 19-year-old kids. We did our PT. We ran a lot. We had 2 hills called Ballbuster 1 and Ballbuster 2, and then there was a third one called Cardiac, and it was the one right after another, and they were brutal straight up and down hills that were about 3/4 of a mile, straight up, and we ran them, and we ran a lot, and it was cold, and I remember running like a lot of the olders. I wouldn't call it hazing. I would call it integration. We were, it strives to make you want promotions. I don't feel as the way that we got smoked was. I looked at it as a bonding experience. I do, but I remember running at nighttime, and like we would do these. After everything would all shut down, there was always the corporals and the specialists in there that are going to mess with privates when they come in, and we always used to have the GI parties, and we would, scrub the entire floor with, toothbrushes and scrapers, and if anything was found, you had to redo it, or they would come out there and they would throw stuff on there, just dump stuff, just to, it's not quite clean here, let me help you out with this. And one time we went out on a run, there's about a foot of snow, and we went out there on a run because there was some gum left on the floor, I remember, and we'd scrubbed all day long on that hallway, and it was a long hallway, and we went on a run and run through the barracks and run through the woods, and we were in summer PJ. I mean, it didn't matter. It wasn't that cold, but it was still an experience. I thought, what did I join the military for? What is going on here? But the guy who was doing it ended up, he was our sniper, and he was well trained, and I'm going to leave his name out of it because I don't know what he does now, but he was we ended up, I owe a lot of my promotions to him because I got field promoted a lot, and I was a HUA soldier. I volunteered.
What unit were you a member?
What?
What unit were you a member?
Charlie Company, 2nd Battalion, 6th Infantry Regiment of the 1st Armored Division. And when we deployed to Iraq, my company deployed, and we guarded 5th Corps TOC. General Tommy Franks was the commanding general, and we guarded the TOC as we bounded north with the 3rd ID. And we, as the platoons, we tasked ourselves out with, there was Special Forces, 4th ID, 101st Airborne. We do missions, you know what I mean? Like one company would one platoon would guard the TOC, because we had our Bradleys, 4 Bradleys per platoon. There's 25 millimeter machine gun.
Okay, you go from Germany to Kuwait.
Yes.
Now when you land in Kuwait, what do you do?
Am I still on camera?
Yeah, you're fine.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so we got orders to go to Kuwait. We cleaned our stuff. We pillaged everybody's equipment to get our stuff changed. So we could have, because we had to get geared up to go. Our Bradleys were, they need to be on the rail. They need to be at Antwerp because they had a long boat ride. So we scraped mud off the Bradleys for in the freezing cold German and changed track. You know, like changing track it's an experience if you've never done it. But we did that during the winter and we got geared up and we deployed with I think 16 Bradleys and a couple 113s, which a 113 is a versatile vehicle. Worked in Vietnam, worked. It's a good vehicle. It is good troop transport, but it's rough riding. Okay, so we weren't allowed to tell anybody. We were deploying to Kuwait in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, which Operation Enduring Freedom was in Afghanistan, but yet we were deploying to Kuwait, which it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what was going on. Mm-hmm. When we get to Kuwait, it's funny, we flew civilian airlines. I mean, full gear, like you got your weapon on there. It's the only experience and you got your weapon on the airplane. I mean, everything's, because it's your sensitive item. Once you sign that out of your armory, it's yours until you get back. So we flew Hawaiian Air out of Ramstein to Doha, Kuwait, and I thought, boy, that was, I don't know what. But anyway, we landed there, and I remember we stepped off the plane, and there was a dust storm, and there was about 20 or 30 foot visibility. And I thought, we're not in Kansas anymore. It was, the wind was blowing, and it was hot, and everything there had an orange glow because of the dust. And we proceeded to go to, I think they bused us to Camp Pennsylvania is where I was at. It was a hasty staging area, so to speak, not far from the border where the berm was. When the berm is the border, and we were there, and they were always doing scud warnings. I think he was always shooting scuds or something was going on, but we were always, it didn't matter where you were at, you always kept your pro mask on because we were always worried about gas. And you have to don it in under, I think it's 9 seconds or something like that. And you always kept it on you. You kept your weapon, but we didn't have to be in full battle rattle there, I don't think. But we were there for like 2 weeks, and I remember I thought, we're in the desert, and then at nighttime it gets so cold, and I thought, why is it so cold in the desert? I always thought this place was hot, but it's not. But sand doesn't hold heat, and when the sun goes down, it loses all its and then it gets cold, but it'll go from 100 to 60, and that's cold. We'll freeze to death, it feels like. So they had these concrete bunkers. We stayed in the are they GP mediums?
GP mediums.
Okay, yeah, we stayed in tents.
That's the Army tent.
Yeah, we stayed like that on cots, and they were just staging area. And, we went to the chow hall, and there were other units there. And then while I was there, I remember at the next camp over, Camp Virginia, is when that 101st Airborne soldier ran in the command tent with a grenade and detonated it. We were in another camp, but I mean, news traveled fast, and we were all in the same, different units here and there, and I was young Joe. I didn't know what was going on, I just knew that I was Joe, I was E2. I took orders.
What was your MOS?
11 Bravo infantryman.
Okay.
So I remember being in Kuwait and they doing the scud or drills or I don't think they were drills, to be honest with you. I mean, I think he was firing them. At the same time, they were doing the bombing runs, and I remember seeing the stealth bombers flying, and they would always fly, and they would fly north to south, coming over Kuwait, and they would go in there and they'd just do whatever, run their patterns. And I later find out that they'd done round-trip missions from Missouri. They would fly from Missouri, refuel in the air. That's a long, long flight, and they would run non-stop missions and bombing missions, and it's an amazing feat of endurance to do something like that. On another note, they're leveling whatever, bombing their targets and stuff. And I remember Bush giving that I think 48 or 24-hour ceasefire. I don't remember. We were just kind of sleep deprived, and we were always antsy. Ready? We didn't know. We were always like, we knew we were going. We knew we were going across the burn. We just didn't know when. So we were always trying to keep our dust out of our weapons. And as an infantryman, eating and sleeping is the last thing on your priorities. You always cleaned your weapons. You always stood your guard, and you followed your general orders to a letter.
Have any contact with the local people in Kuwait?
No, none,
Okay.
none. If they were, I think our bus drivers were Kuwaiti, but no,
Okay.
no. And I've actually been to Kuwait a few different times later on. So he gave the orders to give that, and then we rolled across the berm, and we got in our Bradleys, and it was the longest ride of my entire life. Took us like 3 weeks to get to Baghdad, and we rode in them Bradleys, them loud Bradleys, for like 12 hours straight, and they're so packed. I mean, your benches in them Bradleys aren't 6 feet long, and you got 3 people on them, and then we called it, I think it was the hell hole in between there. But there's a little crawl space where you can crawl and get to the driver, and there's a little seat back there, and somebody sits there, and you're right next to the engine and the turret. And I was a saw gunner, and I carried an M249 squad automatic weapon, which is it's a belt-fed, fully automatic machine gun that fires from the open bolt. It's a wonderful weapon. Shot a 5.56, weighed 16 pounds. I carried 1,000 rounds of ammo, and I sat next to my squad leader, Staff Sergeant Christopher Duggar, who was 6'5", and I'm 6'4", and our legs intertwined, and his knees were up in my groin area, and it was so loud you can't talk in the back of them. So we done paper, rock, scissors wars, and we just played that with each other because there's nothing else to do, and except where Sam wind and dust, because our Bradley ramp door would bleed off hydraulic fuel and open up, and dust would just pour in, and it was me and him right here next to the door. And Jacob Shute was sitting next to me, and you're just huddled up, I mean hip to hip. Legs are like this, there's no room. You got 25 mic rounds underneath your feet, tow missiles in there with you. It's an experience. And you ride, and you try to hold your bathroom breaks to a minimum, and hopefully you got a bottle. It's all guys in there anyway. And we stopped, and we would stop and camp for the night. And I remember we got out one day, and all we have is these periscopes in the back, so you can't see nothing. And we had 1980 style Bradleys, so every now and then you can't see out of them. I mean, there's portholes where you can stick your weapon out and shoot and stuff. And so you look out there, and all you do is when like the Bradley commander, who was Sergeant Crittenden, he was in the old guard before there. He was good at DNC.
DNC.
Drill and ceremony.
Okay.
He was with the old guard there at Arlington. Or I don't remember the name of that. It's the base out there in Washington somewhere.
Fort Myer.
I think so. It's the old guard for
Yes,
3rd
that
Infantry.
is Fort Myers. That's 3rd Infantry.
Yeah, he was our Bradley commander,
Okay.
and I can't remember who his gunner was. Anyway, but the only time you would know is they would just open this little turret door. They could see, their heads were poked up. They would just say, "Ramp's going open," And what you do in a Bradley as an infantryman is you peel out like that. The squad leader, he goes one way, the saw gunner goes another way, and then you drop down and you guard your sector. Interlocking sectors of fire, and that's how you peel out of them. Is what I equate it to, and which we call it, because we were dismount troops. We were hauled to where we go, and then we get out and we march. Mm-hmm. So my friend Shute, he laid in some camel crap and got back in, and we had to stop the convoy because he stunk so bad. Yeah, that was funny. He stunk so bad, but he laid off of that stuff. We middle of, there's nothing out there. And in southern Iraq, there's this, we stopped right before there. I wish I would have got a picture, but there's a natural bluff area where it goes from the desert into the, I guess, the river valley or something, but it's a natural bluff. And we stopped, and we were probably 5 or 6 miles from it, but it was still a picturesque scene. And you know, I remember thinking, there's nothing here. Why can't we just take a break? You know, why do we have to be guarding the desert? And anyway, because a couple of you guard, another one's taking knee and use the latrines, and he laid in some camel crap, and it stunk as soon as we got in the Bradley, and we had to stop the entire company convoy because we couldn't deal with it. It was too rough, and it was going to be a long ride.
So what'd you do?
He just got out and cleaned. I think he changed his BD or DCUs, or wiped it off, cleaned it, took some water. Anyway, he got it off there, and then we get back in. Yeah, that's funny. I forgot about that. And then we get to a town called Iskandariyah, and that was where me and my friend Will Morgan and a couple others, we built. It's probably still there. It was one of the best fighting positions I've ever dug in my entire life. It was 2 standard sandbag, like pillared, like machine gun nest, and it was like fully enclosed, like 4x4 pillars with roof, and but they had us out there doing that because we dug in. There was an airfield there, and so when we get there, I remember we got there in the middle of the night, and we would always go up and we would scout for 5th Corps because they needed a safe place to land their Humvees, and so we would always go out, and we got there. We didn't encounter nothing, we really didn't until we got to Iskandariyah, and we didn't really encounter much there because we had a lot to deal with the 101st Airborne. They called in air support for us. But we took some sniper fire that day. But we was there for like 3 weeks, and so when we was there, we got there, 5th Corps got there, and that was when the dust storm hit. The one that shut down the war. I was there in Iskandariyah when it blew in that morning, or that night. I was sleeping, and I remember that because I went to sleep and I woke up. And in Iraq, you wouldn't believe it, but there's a lot of mosquitoes, and we were eating anti-malaria pills because, I'd like to say they over-worried us about the things, but, leishmaniasis, flesh-eating diseases, you're going into a third world country, your bodies aren't acclimated to it, things can happen. So we were always prepared for that, even though I wasn't prepared for it. I didn't like taking the medication. I quit taking it because it gave me horrible nightmares during a lot of us did. I'm just going to go on and say that they forced us to take it, but we didn't do it because it was really messing with our dreams. It really, I think it was dioxycycline. I'm not really sure, but it really made us have vivid dreams, like you're living them, and none of us, only the Gulf War ones, had seen combat, so there's no reason why we should be having that crazy of dreams, and more.
Where's Iskandariyah? Where's that located?
South. I think it's south of Baghdad. I don't remember that main route, but there's like a road. It's a main road that runs from Kuwait, but it's Al Iskandariyah, and there's an air base there, and we were there. And we watched the entire 101st Airborne Division come in. And Geraldo Rivera was there, and that's when he got kicked out because he divulged information. And before, he got previewed information, and he passed it on. And I think he should have got more, but that's, people die, when you give out information like that, especially when it hadn't happened yet. And I'm pretty upset with him still because I remember him standing out there. I was in this little hut. And me, my team leader, he was Corporal then, Corporal Bruce, Tim Bruce from California. And there was like 3 or 4 of us out there. And it was just this little hut there by the road. There was a main road, and then there was a road going into the air base. And one day the entire 101st Airborne Division decided to roll in, you know, and that's a lot of trucks and helicopters coming in. And there wasn't much to do out there. There were some geckos. I remember the geckos running around, and or the chameleons, not the ones. Which one is the one that can camouflage? Chameleons. Okay, they were chameleons, and they were little bitty. And we started, you know, we had our water bottles and with our ants in them, you know, ant farms and stuff like that. There wasn't much to do on guard shift when you weren't on guard, except lay down and sleep, and you can't do that all the time. So we played with the chameleons, and you know, and I actually thought I got malaria for the first time there, because the symptoms are, you know, uncontrollable bowel movements and vomiting, and I was like out there with a bucket running around, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've got malaria, and then it dried up and I didn't. And that was my first thought, is, oh no, I've got malaria. I was still taking the pills at that time too, but I thought I knew I had malaria.
Where did you first take sniper fire?
In Iskandaria. We went out on a mission, and there was 3rd Platoon. I don't remember his name. It was a staff sergeant. I can't remember. He got a Bronze Star, though. I can't remember his name, but he was in 3rd Platoon. He was a Bradley commander, and we just dismounted, and we were just going to walk around the city, and it was, you know, your typical Iraqi city. You know, there was mud huts. There was no running water, no sewage. You know, they cut ditches out of their house, and it was black sewage, and it would crust over. And I actually stepped in it one time and covered my entire boot in it, and it was raw sewage. And so we're sitting there, and I remember him. I remember it was like it's yesterday. He looked up, and he was standing there with Bradley like this, and we heard tink, tink, tink like that, and then somebody hit us, and I remember him saying something like, did y'all hear that, or something along those. We're taking fire, and we all started to duck. We didn't know where it was coming from, but then boom, 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 our battle drills kick in, and he dropped his run on his turret, and then we followed him behind the Bradley, and it was about 4 hours there, and it seemed like it was 15 minutes, you know, it did. And I remember running behind the Bradley, and we were in full battle rattle. I'm talking, I interceptor, body armor, everything, and you never seem to get tired. Never. And we never found the sniper. I mean, we went door to door. We cleared buildings. I kicked so many doors in, my feet hurt. Really. And we split off into teams because there were so many. And we just went and we kicked doors and we searched and we kicked doors and we searched and we looked, and we ended up calling, or they called, you know, there was word that said they'd shot an RPG or something like that close, and I don't want to get much off into much of that, but it was my first experience with combat, and they call it tasting the bayonet, when you can taste the metallic taste in the back of your mouth when it's pure adrenaline. I knew a special forces guy who told me that because we were talking, and he's like, we call that tasting the bayonet. You know, when you can, it tastes like you're sucking on a piece of metal. Man, all it is just pure, unadulterated adrenaline coursing through your veins. And it took me. I didn't sleep that night because I was so like amped up from it, you know, like we didn't know if we were going to be counterattacked. We had these berms, and we always had to keep guard. We pulled 50% security at all times, one man up, one man down. And we had our berms and our Bradleys, and we had our I can't even remember the name of it was a sighting system for a javelin. Which is a shoulder-fired, I can't remember the name. It was a sensitive item, but it was a handheld thing, and it's pretty super high speed to look out across the desert. And I think it had thermal vision. It's so expensive. I was a Joe, and I couldn't touch it.
Is it a night vision device?
Yes and no. It's an optical device I believe for a javelin. It's a big square device, and a javelin sits up on your shoulder like this, and a javelin is a shoulder fired. It's like a surface to air missile, pretty much, heat seeking, I believe. And we used that, and we just looked out over the desert, and that's when when we were in Iskandariyah for like a week. A week. And then there was this other place that we'd stopped, and they built berms, the engineers, and we rolled our Bradleys up on the corners of this berm. And I remember Third ID got into some stuff, and we got word over the wire that there might be a counterattack, and we all didn't know whether or not what to do, so we had our Bradleys, and then let me backtrack. We were in MOP 2 for the first 60 days, which is a charcoal lined suit. We didn't have the boots on, and we carried our pro mask, but we had to have our bottoms and our tops on. So it was extremely hot. We didn't shower. We got pretty stinky. We lived off 2 MREs a day. Got pretty hungry. Yeah, but we never did. That counterattack never came, but it was stuff like that. We were always on guard. We didn't know what to expect. And when we were on the roll to Baghdad, still hadn't been taken. The airport still hadn't been taken. Third ID was getting into stuff all over the place, and we were tasking ourselves out, and that's what would happen in Iskandariyah is, the other 2 platoons guarded the FOB, or I wouldn't really call it a forward operating base, even though it turned out to be a forward operating base. It wasn't at the time. It was a staging area. It was a good staging area.
When you were just kicking in the doors, were there people in the houses that you were going in?
No, never encountered nobody. Not that time. The city was pretty desolate. My friend Ricky Mingy, he seen somebody pop out on a roof with an AK-47, and his freaking weapon jammed. I remember that. I do, and but he spotted him. He was the one. He did, and his weapon jammed because he popped out on the roof, and that's one of the first times I remember I called them our guardian folks. They were the older people, and they just come out of the middle of the desert, and they were Americans or British, this time it was an American. And I remember we were standing on this wall, and they just come over the radio that somebody shot an RPG or whatever, and up comes this dude walking up behind me, he didn't get into our, but he come up there and he got in the stack with me. And I was like, I looked back, and I was wondering, who the F is this? Where did you come from? You're super high speed in your cargo shorts with your freaking MP5, And he's like, I remember him saying, he's like, well, we should just demo the building and search the rubble. And I was like, I think you need to talk to my commander about that. I'm just a private. In hindsight, I know he's just messing with me, but I was like, I think you need to talk to my commander before you start.
Who was this guy?
I never knew his name. He was a spook, or was he
military?
If he wasn't wearing insignia. He was one of those. We had a group there called Task Force 20, and they were compiled. They were in Iraq. They compiled to the best of the best, out of every unit, and then they had civilian contractors there with, I call spook CIA agents, because they did spooky, Scooby stuff overseas, and they were one-man operations. But anyway, this guy comes up behind me, and he says that, and he hangs out with us for a little bit, and then he just up and goes on about his way, where did he go? He's a one-man. Oh, my cup is freaking leaking out of the bottom there. Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. I've got somewhere.
Dang, them cups are.
Yeah.
That's coffee you got to drink, yep.
Yeah, that's one of those Yeti things.
Thank you, sir. I got it on your floor a little bit.
That's okay.
So, before I lose my train of thought, anyway, nobody got injured during that
You said
hiatus.
this guy showed up, this kind of, you didn't know who he was, and he went on his way.
Yeah, I thought he was Captain America kind of dude, that's the way you look. He was probably my age now, talking to an 18, 19-year-old kid, and that's what I thought I was a man, but now looking back, we were kids playing war, boys and their toys is the way I looked at it, because we all volunteered, it was an experience, but that opened my eyes to the training that they taught us, and they taught us, and my drill sergeants in basic training, they said your training will always kick in, and it does. And that coupled with your pure unadulterated adrenaline, it makes for a combination if you're good when all the pieces of the military work together for a cumulative mission, it is one of the most amazing things a person can witness. When all facets are being used for one mission, that is an experience that I will never ever forget, and I will always have high regard for all service members, because we all had a mission and we completed it. There's a lot of talk about the weapons of mass destruction, which I will continue further on. If there's later on in the story, later on. So we move out of Iskander. Okay, so let me continue on with the sandstorm. It shut down the war for like 2 days. It was picking up gravel, I bet, almost the size of marbles, and throwing it around. And I remember my friend, James Hoff, he's from St. Louis, and he went to sniper school and all this, and he got out of the U.S. Army and he went to the Coast Guard, and as far as I know, he's still in the Coast Guard. And anyway, he's PT stud, he's good at what he done. But we were privates together, and we actually we shared a bathroom in Germany. We were not roommates, we were bathroom mates. But I remember his BV sack, which a BV sack is your fart sack, whatever your sleeping bag. But it whisked that thing away and just sucked it out of the ground, like off the ground, and it was gone. I'm talking like that sleeping bag probably flew 100 feet in the air, and it was gone. There was nothing, you couldn't see. And I was sitting there with your goggles on, you're like, what is happening? What is this? And we couldn't run anything, all our equipment had to be shut off. And I just remember wanting to stay in my bivy sack, because that's what I did, and it was hot, but you stayed in your bivy sack because at nighttime the mosquitoes would eat you. Any kind of
your BB sack.
Bivy, sleeping bag.
Okay.
Yeah, your sleeping bag. Bivy, so we call it bivy sack. But I just wanted to stay in my sleeping bag because the sun, you couldn't even, the sun was even blotted out by the dust, and it was, I remember being like an orangey dark glow and this never ending sand just blowing everywhere, and I thought, this is an experience, this is really something to see, watching a bivy sack just, suck away like a helium balloon even faster. And days ran together, and I believe it was there we got to take our first showers, and there were, we called them the Aussie showers because we used an Australian shower bag, and we hung it off our barrel of our machine gun off the Bradley, and you got about a gallon of water, and you just wash your parts. We carried baby wipes, but we got pretty dirty, we took that, and that was like, because I remember on my birthday, April 26th, we were at Baghdad, and that day we got a shower again, and they shave and creamed me and zip tied me and left me on the tarmac for my birthday. I do remember that too.
What'd they do?
They zip tied my hands and feet together and sprayed shaving cream all over me and left me on the tarmac out there at Baghdad International Airport. It was his birthday present.
What'd you do?
There's some pictures. They took pictures and they laughed and they thought it was funny. I was mad because it was, so we get to Baghdad, And I guess they'd had hell taking like the airport and stuff, and we were always like there, you know, like we knew that like that was before BIOP was even there. And when we got to the airport, there wasn't much to do. BIOP, Baghdad International Airport. So we get there and we start digging in, and that's what we always did. You know, Fifth Corps, they got to stay in their little air conditioned. We weren't allowed to. You know, we're grunts. We're going to sleep outside. You know, you can find a grunt when you can look in somewhere, and you're like, I don't think I can walk in there. There's a platoon of grunts in there somewhere. So well, you know, they'll stick you in some. But anyway, so we dig in, and we were like, we're going to stay here for a little bit, and so we do. You know, we P tubes. We buried PVC pipes in the ground for you know, and dug her. At this time, we had slit trenches before, but we upgraded and got to have cut off 55-gallon drums and wooden, you know, and we had to tass out and we burned our poop with jet fuel. But anyway, so we dig in there BIOP, and I remember we got to go in there and we got to stay in the airport one night. And I thought that was the first time I'd been indoors sleeping for like a month and a half. It's like a month and a half. And I remember a few of my friends, were playing Uno, and in the airport there. And during the day, it was fun. There wasn't a lot to. Once the airport was cleared, we got them little baggage cart things, and we used our Bradley tarps. They had ropes on them, and the wind was so strong and the tarmacs were clear, so we got on these luggage things and we threw our Bradley tarps up to catch wind while we tied them to the luggage racks, and we were riding them up and, you know, up and down there the runway, trying to get as much speed as we could, you know, just having fun and wipe it out and stuff. And, you know, we did that for a day and it was fun. We lost a soldier there. We had a malfunction on our Bradley, and when they turned it on to start the batteries, the main gun fired, and it killed a guy. And his name was Josh Morrison, and he's from Wyoming, and he died that day. And it was a gate that every one of us had guarded, you know, all of us privates, and it was any number of people, any day. You know, I was on there just a few hours earlier than him, and it was a freak accident. I don't know.
So the gun misfired, hit him?
No, it didn't. It misfired, or when they turned the Bradley on, it fired, and there wasn't even nobody. It was some.
So how far was he?
He was from here to that little awning, 20 feet, 30. Okay. The velocity, it ripped his face off and blew bone fragments into the guy that was standing next to him. Yeah, it was pretty bad. We didn't know if we were getting attacked. I remember I was sitting there and I heard the gun go off, and you know, Joe's do what you do. You always grab your weapon and run somewhere. You go get behind cover, and then word got around, and our medic come, and he was Doc Reese, and he was covered in blood, and I was fucking shocked. I'm sorry for my language. It's something I'll never forget. Some coming up to me covered in blood like that. But anyway, so we had his memorial, and then we moved on. We went to Fallujah, and our unit hadn't got there. We knew that they were coming, and we were tasking ourselves out with different units, you know, to go and. Because I remember when they were deciding on when to give our company our combat patch, we'd actually done combat we'd attached ourselves with so many units that technically we could have gotten more, you know, like, because we were in the shit with some different units, you know. And so we go to Fallujah, and I think it was like an hour from Baghdad, and they call it the Sunni Triangle, which Sunni it's Sunni and Shia religion. And the Shias fight the Sunnis, and they always have since Karbala, and the Battle of Karbala was over 1,000 years ago. It was actually in 700, 800 somewhere. Anyway, they fought for a long time, and that was the Sunni Triangle because it was the most dangerous place in the world at the time. So we get there, and I remember getting to Fallujah, and we went to, it was called Camp Dreamland, and it was a dream. There was a lake there, and we got to swim, and it was amazing. It was like, yeah, we got to swim, but it was outside the city, and we had our main mission was we'd taken over the Ba'ath Party headquarters in downtown Fallujah after the 82nd Airborne got fragged and killed some guys. We assumed that duty, and it was just this little. It was like a house, like a compound with some walls, and man, it was a tough deal. It was. We pulled 2 hours on, 2 hours off, and you do that for about a week or two. It was that rough. I don't remember how many days you were down there, but each platoon rotated between the lake and town and running missions. So we, I remember we were there like a month, and then we decided to do a mission. We actually decided to do 2 missions while we was there. One, combat camera came, and my team raided a house for a high value target in Fallujah, and combat camera showed up there. But I was scared shitless. I was, and we trained and we trained and we trained at our little Camp Dreamland place. We laid out rope tape on the ground, and we set up different styles of houses, and you do moving on urbanized terrain, and we did that over and over and over and over and over. And I remember changing out my saw for an M4 with another guy so we could all have small caliber or small weapons when we went in there. So I remember, I always think of, Siege of Firebase Glory, and when Lee Emery's like, there's no atheists in a foxhole, you're going to pray to something when you're going into something like that. And I remember it was eerie feeling, the Bradley ride over, and, like nobody said nothing. Like, we trained the day before, and we knew it was coming, and my team got tasked with it. And we were the breach team. And the oldest person in our team was maybe 21, 22, and that was our team leader, Tim Bruce. And he was a HUA team leader. He came from 25th Infantry, and he was light infantry. And he was all about it, and I was all about it, and the rest of us were all about it. And when we got tasked that, and I wrote a letter home, my friend Shoot, I believe, was in on that one. We were in the same. Me and Jacob Shoot we were close. I think he was in that team with me. But anyway, we rolled there in our Bradleys, and I just remember we just looked at each other we know what's fixing to happen. And we get there, and the walls around the house, and we thought, well, how the hell are we going to get in here? So they just improvised, and they drove the damn Bradley through the wall and backed the thing out, and we just run through the wall, and then there was another door. So we stacked on there, and then we called the breach, and I run up there, and I remember kicking, and the damn door wouldn't open, and finally we got in there, and our sniper, no, I'm going to leave his name out of it, but he was so gung-ho that he ran in there and drug that dude out of there and when not a shot was fired, and we got him, and I think they found a chest full of. They were only allowed so many thousands of dollars in American currency and dinars, Iraqi dinars. And I don't remember ever seeing it, but I remember them, word passing down that there was, a lot of money in there, and
who was this guy?
I have no idea,
Was he a sniper or what?
No, he was, the guy that we went in after, he was just a high value target that we were tasked out to get. We were, we were still looking for the the people on the deck of cards, the 20 most, you know, they were out there, and we weren't doing special forage. I mean, but they were there. You know, we knew who. You knew about like what you were going to do and who you were going to get, and that was our first raid. Like, and we were in Fallujah, and this was before the Battle of Fallujah. So that was an experience, that house. And then we ran a mission. We knew that they were selling weapons or trading weapons. There was a weapons market just out there, like in this like little area, you know, and like they'd pull off the side of the road and they would just open their trunks and it was like a freaking flea market, you know. And so the smart move, our company commander, they come up with the idea, like they could hear our Bradleys coming and they would leave. So they didn't care if it was an ash and trash, which I call an ash and trash like a 5-ton or a deuce and a half. They wouldn't stop doing that if they would roll. So command got the idea that we were going to load a bunch of infantry troops in the back of these 5-tons and drive like wide open, like we're going to pass, and then as soon as we're there, just lock the brakes up and be a rough landing, you know, and jump out. And we did this. And jumping out of the back of a 5-ton and full battle rattle, I remember hitting the ground and my spine felt like it contracted. I was like, ow, that hurt. And I was like, oh shit, I got a LOA, a limit of advance. And I remember our sniper, he got up on the roof and started, you know, he was overwatch. He put some lead down range. None of us did on that one. But we said that we shocked them. We did. They didn't know, and we did. It was a flawless, and they just they didn't know what to do. They held their hands up, and we got enough AK-47s and RPGs to probably fill this room and halfway, you know, where the ceiling fan goes into your roof. That many.
Who were these people selling these
weapons? Warlords, weapons. I have no idea, you know, but it was a major cachet of, you know, each Iraqi was allowed to have one AK.
Where did this happen?
Fallujah.
Fallujah.
Yes, in Al-Fallujah. And we got all these weapons, and and we couldn't fit them all in one Bradley, you know, like, I was so many. I remember I've never seen that many AK-47s in my life. And then after it's all over, I remember a limit of advance is an LOA, and it makes an L. One pushes this way and the other pushes this way, and then you set up for a counterattack. And that's what your mission is. We didn't worry about anything else at that time. If you're a private, you're going to do your LOA. There is always an LOA, or you're going to die trying to achieve it. And then you set up security. You watch you know what I mean? You don't deviate from your mission at all, because your battle buddy depends on you keeping good security. So, and I remember thinking, and word got around, I was like, who fired the shot? And I found out it was our friend, you know, he was on the right side, and I thought, well, I wonder, you know, what a day, you know, what a day. Nobody got killed, you know, at least from our side, you know, and I was like, what a day, you know. And then I thought, we were that close to getting killed. You know, like, they could have just... I mean, I ran up on a guy, and he just dropped his weapon, like, and I thought you'd put up a bigger fight than that. You know, I really did. You know, that was my first inclination. I thought, is it really that easy? But we surprised them. We did, you know, and it was a flawless mission.
What kind of vehicle do they have?
It was just little bitty. They used to have these taxi cabs, and they were orange and white. They were like two-tone, like the fenders were orange and the doors were white and the roof was white. And they were just little bitty cars, and and they were like Fiats, and you know, like.
And they were selling weapons out of these cars?
They were selling them or trading them, or they had them in their trunk loads full of them. I don't know what they were doing, but we didn't approve of it, and we got them, like, and it was a good mission. But in hindsight, as I've gotten older, the world's a small place, you know. They knew what unit was there, you know. We wear our unit patches, and I feel like the Marine Corps got a lot of hell because we disturbed that. You know what I mean? We upset some people, and they fucking gave them hell in Fallujah. They did. Fallujah was it was a hellhole. We got out of there when they shot an RPG into our building while we were on guard, and it blew my friend Dimitri off the Bradley. He was sitting on the Bradley and rode by on a motorcycle and shot an RPG. And I thought I was dead because you're only getting 2 hours sleep, and it's like, and you always full clothes, and you go up to the roof and you're like, what is going on, and that's what, and we got orders to go retask with our unit, but that was the end of May of 2003, and we'd been there for 2.5 months. No, we had 1 more month. I'm sorry, let me backtrack. We knew our unit was in Kuwait, the rest of the 1st Armored Division. So we were going to go back to Baghdad and liaise with them at some point in time, I guess, as we wanted to continue to do missions like we were doing with our platoons and tasking ourselves out. That was fun. I say fun, and I use that word lightly. Don't, we were infantry. That's what it was. We got to do some fun stuff. It was mission critical. So we go back to Baghdad, and by this time they've already developed BIOP. It's staging area. They're running multiple sorties in and out of there. Burger King came. I remember that, and so my company we go to the Baghdad Zoo. Okay, and Saddam had told them to turn loose all the animals. So. And there was some turned loose. It was a humanitarian mission, pretty much, but I wasn't there for like a week because I'll get into that. So we stayed at this house, and it was like a mansion, and it was just in the middle of the zoo. And we got word that the tigers were loose out running around, and to be careful on our patrols, and shoot. Then there was wild dogs that were rabid too, and they would chase you, and you have to defend yourself even if it's against an animal, which we never even. I don't believe they got to do that. I remember my friend Levi Bradstream from South Dakota. He was the other saw gunner in my squad. Me and him carried saws, squad automatic weapons. We were our machine gunners, and there was this bear, and it was starved, and it was in a pen that wasn't even as big as your table, and it was cruelly, inhumanely kept in there, and no food, no nothing, no water, no nothing. And it was bars, like a jail bars, and it was just atrocious to see some animals like that. And when we got there, me and Bradstream, we were walking around checking everything out, and I remember him sticking his hand up there and wanting to pet this thing, and I was like, no, do not stick your hand in there, that thing will eat you. And he was just like that. That was funny. He never stuck his hand in there, but it was, I remember him doing, because the bear looked, it was like, its head was so big because its body was so skinny, and it was horrible to look at. And so we got word over the wire that they needed a QRF, a quick reaction force. In my squad, we were the best squad in our company, and we got tasked out for.
What happened to the animals in the zoo? Did people?
I don't know. I think that humanitarians. I think that we got food into them. I'm not sure. I was only there a couple days, and then my squad. 7 or 8 of us in an RTO, we got tasked out to be when the 1st Armored got there, we were tasked for quick reaction force for the division. So my squad got to go back to Baghdad International to BIOP, and we got to stay in the airport, and we flew around with the Black Hawk helicopter pilots and the General's pilots, and we logged combat hours in the Black Hawks. And we just flew around. We mapped the terrain. We landed, we'd go and land on a soccer field or land here, land there. Like I always thought, I wonder what the locals think when we just come and just freaking land somewhere. Like in a helicopter. And we were briefed specifically that we had one pilot. He's like, You know, I'm not even touching down. You know, you're out of this bird. As soon as I get down, get out. And then you only have so long, because that's what they do. They come in, they just touch off, and that's it. You get out. And we always flew with doors open. And I was a saw gunner, so I was always on the edge, you know, because you always had to be the first one out of the door. And I remember we landed on hot LZ. I call it hot. I don't know. We got 2 or 3 shots fired at us, you know, but we'd already been through Iskandariya and Fallujah. And I remember my squad leader calling, we were doing a mock 9-line, which is 9-line medevac, and we were doing a mock one, which is like we were training mission. And I remember him saying, by the way, it's hot LZ, and then they just come in there and landed and got us real quick, and they just zipped us out of there, you know, like, but they would put that bird in between you and the fire, and because they had crew chiefs, and we got a certificate of achievement for that, I believe, is what the generals gave us. And then our final ride was like the best roller coaster ride in the world. We got the best pilot, and they flew us around, and they done the stall thing where they fly straight up in the air and then they kill it and let it fall. And I remember sitting there holding my weapon, and you always kept your barrel pointed to the ground. And I remember my 16-pound machine gun just floating, just like that. And I'm holding my hand like this, and I'm like, I feel my stomach in my chest, and I'm like, you know, like that. We're seeing. I was like, whoa, you know, it was the most funnest experience flying that fast. And you're zipping around. Next thing you know, you're looking out like this, and there's a river, and then next thing you know, you're like this, and there's the sky, and you're like, whoa. But so we got back with our company, and we went to this place called Camp Mule Skinner. Clever names. Anyway, it was a forward operating base, and I spent about 9 months there, and it was in a town called Mahmudiyah, and it was right outside of Baghdad, and I call it a suburb. And I mean, there was some nice houses in Baghdad. For the most part, it's a poverty-stricken country. It is. It's horrible how bad it is in some places. And that was like this sector, you know. We had an ammo control point that we guarded there, and it was just ammunition that was just strung all over the ground. It was an old Iraqi place, and we had a machine gun nest set up there at the intersection. And I remember we always had to be there, and then we always had to be roving around, you know, to make sure that people weren't coming in there to steal the UXO, you know, this was before they started doing IEDs. We didn't know nothing about them yet. But we knew we had to guard that facility. And I remember that was the first time I got ate with sand fleas. And I thought I was going insane, because you can feel them digging in you, but you can't see them unless you get down almost with a microscope. And you see them, and there's no amount of... They go through your mosquito nets, and we had our mosquito nets because there were so many flies and stuff, and you had to keep your flies and mosquitoes off your food, or you would get dysentery or something like that. You always, and you could like literally leave your feet with your socks out, and there would be nothing but covered in flies, solid flies all over. It's disgusting. But the sand fleas, man, they dig in and they'll just chew on you, and it's like, and I remember the military gave us DEET cream, 100% DEET cream. No, I mean, it's not, you can't buy the stuff at your local Walgreens. But I rubbed it on every exposed skin, because I couldn't, because sand fleas will give you leishmaniasis, and there's flesh-eating disease, and you couldn't sleep. You really couldn't sleep, because they would just eat on you. And so that was part of that. That was your sleeping part at the ammo control point. And we had to have our food trucked in. At this time, we had set up an establishment. We got off the 2 MREs a day. We'd done that for 3 months, and I thought I was starving to death, especially when our supply lines got hit and stuff. You know, we would, you know, and the infantry runs on their stomach, and I've been pretty hungry over there. You know, you're scraping scrounge looking for some MREs when you're black on food. You know. Get black on water, things get serious, you know. And what I mean by black is when you're completely out and you're waiting on your supplies. And we ran, and I feel like we outrun our supply lines because they did. I mean, because in that, I think that's what Iskandariyah was, as a staging point in Midway for Baghdad, because it was too long of a trip, you know, for them to make it from Kuwait all the way up there. You know, we had to have something. And I don't know how, I don't understand the logistics of it. I didn't understand that part, but I knew that we always had to, we had to have that stuff. You know, we were always out there on the front, you know, and we always had to have our stuff brought to us. And when we were at the ammo control point, they brought us stuff in Mermites. And it was hot food, you know, and we were always excited about hot food. And then they issued the curfew for all Iraqis that were out. And so we did curfew patrol, which was a freaking dangerous mission, because we dropped all our weapons. We carried all of our gear except our interceptor body armor to keep us from getting, you know, a fatal round unless you're shot through the ribs. And I carried a mag light and handcuffs and a baton. And anybody out past curfew, we got them, and most of them gave up easily, but some would run from us in cars, and we would be in Humvees, and there was troops in the back of the Humvees, and we would run them down, you know, and some would shoot at us. And it was an experience jumping out of a Humvee when it's moving, when somebody's running, you know, and you jump out of Humvee on top of them, you know, like, it's an experience. But it was one that I volunteered for, because it was something against the norm. You wasn't on guard. Standing guard was hard when you stand in the same place for 6, 12 hours. I mean, that gets rough. So, and it was fun, and it got us out. But it also didn't give us a lot of fanfare either, you know. But it was our mission. You weren't out at Laos past 10, and at 10 o'clock we went rolling down the streets till 6 a.m. And we would confiscate their vehicles and bring them back. And you know, I don't remember that base where they done all that horrid stuff to those prisoners, but that's where I can't remember the name of that. But it was over there in Baghdad. But we would transport people, our people that we captured. If we got word that the intel that they were bad, we took them to the appropriate place. But if they weren't, they were just out past curfew, we made them fill sandbags and helped fill our HESCO baskets, because we had big HESCO baskets to keep.
What's the HESCO basket?
It's a big cloth basket that's probably 6 or 8 by 8 by 8 by 8, and it's about that tall, and you fill it with rocks and sand. And we're building that around that ammo control point, because we had to man that. You know, we had a machine gun nest there, and you know, that's your main mission. You know, sitting on a machine gun. I mean, I've sat many a night. So we done that curfew patrol, and the way we did things, I think it was 4 days of that, 4 days of missions, and then 4 days of you stayed on the fob, and you either did escort the company commander out when he done his, like, go out and talk to people, and all you do is go out there and you stand guard and make sure
What's a fob?
A forward operating base.
Okay.
So we did that 4, 4, and 4, and you didn't get a day off, you know. And when you were on tower guard, you couldn't eat, you couldn't smoke, you couldn't sit down. You worked 4 hours on, 4 hours off, and you did that for 4 days. And you sleep in the commanders, like they had a building where the battalion commander and all that, and you stay there. And we just had this. I remember there wasn't nothing. I thought, why am I guarding over this? There's the Tigris River sitting right there, and it'd be hell for them to get across it, you know. But needless to say, we had a big enough fob that later on they started training Iraqi troops, and I did a little bit of that, but I stressed to my commanders that I had zero trust in them, and later on come to find out a lot of them were in there just scouting out where the big buildings were so they could come in. And, you know, I didn't want to be any part of that. I'm all for an advisory mission, but at that time in my career in the military, I had zero trust in them. You know, Fallujah had taught me a lot of lessons about them. I didn't want to see people die, you know, and damn sure didn't want to die, and I'd send somebody else to meet their maker before I'll meet mine. So we did that, but we guarded. I remember when Donald Rumsfeld and George Bush, they actually came to our fob, but infantry don't get to meet them because we have to guard the place. So, I was pissed off about the whole, I was mad about some things like that, like, I was pretty upset about, the tasks that were given to the grunts, like, there was other people that could have done tower guard and they could have gave us a little more of a break. Everybody's trained with a weapon. And it doesn't take a rocket science to stand in a box. So, the days turn to weeks, the weeks turn to months, the months turn to this. And, okay, so they start giving us R&R. And we got to go to Doha, Qatar for 3 or 4 days, and we went in sections, and they flew us down there. And if I thought Baghdad or Kuwait was hot, I'd never been to Doha, Qatar. That is the hottest place I've ever been in my entire life. Like 100% humidity with well over 100 degrees. And I remember being inside a tent, and inside that tent was another tent, and inside that tent was another tent, and all the tents were air conditioned. And they kept it chilly in there. And they gave us these little vouchers to go in there and drink a few beers. And I bought my dad a chessboard, a handcrafted chessboard, and my mom some stuff. There was bazaars there, but we were on a post, like it was, the U.S. military has a presence in Qatar. Anyway. So, I don't remember what month that was, but we went back, and they pulled us off the rear. I think I was in country like 7 or 8 months before they pulled us off to the rear, completely out of harm's way. Because even at the airport, you were in harm's way because they fired rockets at us. Mm-hmm. And then they gave us R&R, and my R&R fell in December. I think I left on December 12th. I flew home, and I spent a week with my mom in Missouri, and I took a single-engine Cessna out of Springfield, Missouri, and I got to fly over the Ozark Mountains at 6,000 feet with just me and the pilot. It was one of the coolest plane rides I've ever been on in my life. And he was cool enough, like, he let me hold the stick and stuff, and he's like, yeah, it's you just watch the compass. He's like, just keep it pointed at this. And I could hear all their air traffic because it's just me and the pilot, and it's such a beautiful, flying over northeast Arkansas and into there is just so beautiful. And at that height, it was fun. But I went and visited my dad, and then I flew back on Christmas Eve. I remember because my mom, she bawled like a baby, and I remember she told me about it because I wore foot powder, and I took my boots off to go through the metal detector, and my feet had left little footprints, and she was just crying, bawling, and I was like, I'll be okay, Mom, I've already survived this long, and so when I get back, we went, and our platoon, we were told to go and guard this place called the Yellow Cake Factory, and it was centralized and put it in and spin it, but it's uncentralized uranium, but it could still make it a dirty bomb. So there's your weapons of mass destruction. People can eat their hearts out because there was.
What is this?
This is in Baghdad. There's uranium just laying on the ground. It looked like yellow cake mix. It really is all over the ground, and we guarded it. And I walked out in it. It's freaking horrible. And the government still won't even. There was stuff in bunkers that we had Bradleys there. I mean, dude, like concrete bunkers, and we had Bradleys there. And I'm a firm believer that there's something in there that they're not telling us. And I think it's a Tsar Bomba that they bought off the Russians during the Cold War and put it in there as a scare tactic during the 19.
What was it?
A Tsar Bomba is it's a huge nuclear device. I really think it's in there. I mean, why else have that many guns guarding a concrete bunker? And why put grunts laying out there in this dirty yellow uranium stuff, and then them deny everything. Or not deny it, but not really acknowledge it, I guess, so to speak. And it took me up until this year to come to that conclusion about that. We were told there was something in there that was uranium. Well, we weren't told exactly what, but we were told it would be deadlier than the yellow cake. And me and my friend Will Morgan, I remember we were out walking around doing our patrols, and we were authorized to shoot the wild dogs because there was a bunch of them in there, and they would get off in that powder, and they would track the stuff everywhere, you know. And it's uranium just laying on the ground, and it's shocking to know about that stuff. Anyway, me and him were out there walking around, and we got off into it. I remember looking down and seeing our footprints in it, and it looks like snow on the ground, and it's about 3 or 4 inches deep, and it's like yellow. I mean, it looks like yellow cake mix you dump out of the box. I mean, you can't distinguish between the difference, but it ain't. And it took years, and another friend of mine who was an officer, that's who told me it was uncentralized uranium, but they could take and pack that uranium in around an explosive, detonate it, and it would sling that radiation everywhere. So that's where I am with all these people with weapons of mass destruction. I laid in the stuff. I knew what was going on there. I knew it, and I'm not too keenly happy with a lot of people because I knew our mission. I did. So we move on forward, and another experience, I got dysentery, and we were guarding this one bridge over this river, and I think it was the Euphrates, and we were searching thousands of cars a day, and because we were worried they were going to blow the bridge up, you know, and we were out there, and this time we were doing 12 hours on, 12 hours off, and we did that for like 40 or 50 days. And they were trucking our food out by mermites, and as soon as you'd open them, flies would just consume everything. And I was sitting there, and it hits you all of a sudden like that, and it's like you start puking, and you take uncontrollable bowels, and they pulled me off the line, and I woke up like 3 or 4 days later. They'd hooked me up to IVs, and because I was just so dehydrated, you know. And I remember the medic, he was such a good medic. He was like, he done it all by feel. In the middle of the night, gave me an IV, like, and I thought, boy, you're super high speed. And he's like, I was like, no, there's a good one there, and I don't like needles. And he's like, and he starts feeling around. He sticks me just by feel, and and I was like, and I didn't even feel it. But then I went to sleep, and I woke up like days later. Like, there's like 2 days, 3 days later, I'm not even sure, but I was still hooked up to my IVs, you know, and I'd lost a lot of fluid, and then by the time I'd healed, I went out there and we'd assumed the position for another couple more days, and then handed it over to somebody else, and that was a shitty position. I mean, me and another guy, I think it was 3 or 4 of us, got pretty ill, you know, out there, and it was just pure exhaustion, and we were, you know, we had to eat, but we were full, and the flies on it, you know, and it's just, it was horrible, and we were always touching these people and searching them, and some were good and some were just stunk and just dirty, and then others, you know, like at nighttime we would go out and we'd walk through the streets and you'd hear gunfire like from here to outside the window, you know, and we'd take off and go running looking for them, they'd disappear. And I was scared shitless sometimes, you know, like you hear an AK-47 round go off
within. Was this in Baghdad?
Yeah. You hear one go off within 50 feet of you, you know, it's a big caliber weapon, and it does a lot of damage. So on comes, we got replacements. I think in January. Somewhere in there. Anyway, we didn't want nothing to do with them. We didn't, you know. I remember one kid, I mean, he fell asleep on a guard shift, and we knew it because we were walking around roving patrol, you know. We were up all the time. We'd been there that long, you know. You don't freaking sleep much when you know what's out there wanting to hurt you. And he fell asleep, and I remember my staff sergeant out there, and he was a good friend of mine, and I'm sure I'd walk up to him right now, give him a big hug, but that's how well we knew each other. And I was like, man, he's over. I said, that effing G's over asleep. And he said, are you serious? And I said, yeah. And he said, somebody guarding? I said, yeah, we got somebody 10 feet away. We can put somebody there just cause, there's always a more seasoned soldier out there that's, but he's like, well, get his weapon and put it in Bradley. He said, when we're going to roll up, and then we're just going to say, let's go right now. And we did that, and he's like, come on, let's go, Brad. Let's get on. And he's looking for his weapon, We're like, you ain't got time for that shit. You know what I mean? We had it, though, and we took him, and he done so many damn push-ups. He fell asleep on a guard shift. You cannot do that. People die. Yes. So we taught him a lesson. I don't call that hazing. I call that constructive punishment. Because lives are in danger. When you're out there on a guard shift, that's your damn guard shift, and watch your sector. We got there in March. We left in March. So when we get home, the rest of our units still in Baghdad, because our orders were clearly stated. I remember looking at it and said not to exceed 365 days. So we get home and we take our leave, and I stayed tuned up for I was home for 47 days, and I stayed tuned up the entire time. About halfway through, my team leader, Tim Bruce, called me, and he's like, we got orders to go back. He said, they might recall your leave, so he said, if you still want your leave, just don't answer the phone. And I was like, all right. And we took our leave, and we got back there, and we never took our stuffs off pallets, and we flew right back down there, and we went to a town called Sadr City, Sadr City, and we went to a hotter spot. It was pretty freaking dangerous. They were launching mortars in on us, and we were fighting an Iranian-backed militia at the time, and it was, our building that we stayed in, it looked like it was just riddled with holes, and there was people. I couldn't believe the people sleeping outside, you know what I mean, because they would drive up, and they would just Kentucky windage stuff out of the back of trucks, or shooting rockets at you, and I thought, I can't believe the gall of these people, you're sitting here, we got Paladin Warriors, which are tracked vehicles, shoot a 155 round, you know what I mean, and we'd always shoot counter battery at them. It's like, when... But anyway, we pulled guard shift there, but you had to pull guard shift with an NCO or above if you were below, because they had a radio, they had a compass, and you give your 3Ds, your distance, description, and I can't remember. Anyway, distance, description, direction. Yep, that's it. Anyway, and then you call for fire. But you had to have an NCO or above. And I remember being on guard shift with my platoon sergeant, and he was an E7, and I was an E4 at the time, because I went to the sergeant's board. I went to Iraq as an E2, and I went to my sergeant's board at the end of my deployment. So I was an E4 promotable status when I left Iraq the second time. So we go back down there, and we're in Sadr City, and it was fucking hell. It was, a guy named Staff Sergeant Horton was in our Bravo company, and he got killed in a Bradley. They drove a vehicle-borne IED into it, and the gunner, he got burns all over the backs of his hands. I remember seeing him, I knew him, and Staff Sergeant Horton couldn't get his latch closed, and he just burned him up. And the gunner, he got burns all over his hands when he reached up and grabbed the latch thing or whatever, and that was a bad deal. They he's got a building named after him, but yeah, I remember Staff Sergeant Horton dying. That was pretty rough. We'd already been there. They'd been there almost a year, and we'd been there over a year, and we got paid an extra $1,000 a month for casualty pay, which ain't shit, and they stuck us in a worse place. And I remember my last patrol like it was yesterday. I was almost shaking in my boots wanting to get out of sector, because I was like, just one more. I knew we were told it was our last, you know, the first time when we left, it was a different experience. We thought we were done. And then when we went back and we lost Staff Sergeant Horton, and, you know, they were shooting mortars in on us daily, and it was like, you know, you say your Hail Marys, you do whatever you need to do to make it right. But when you can't even walk, we had to have full battle rattle, Kevlar, everything, even to go to the Porter John. It's because they shot that many. I mean, we took that many rounds in every day. And it was fucking hell. It was bad.
Now, was this all in Baghdad?
No, this was in Sadr City. It's actually, I think it's close to Baghdad. It's like 20 miles south. But that militia was apparently pretty bad. We got descriptions of them that they were in like, they were running around in like black, like clothing with a black like hood, like, and like a red sash or something. You know, like they gave us a description and we were authorized, you know, to do things. And I remember my last patrol like it was yesterday, and I was pretty seasoned at this time, you know, like I logged a bunch of times, several times going in houses and clearing houses, which I never thank God I never encountered anybody. I walked in, we cleared one house and there was grenades that they stacked these mattresses up on top of each other. It was thin mattresses and they'd lay them out on the floor. And we cleared this house in the middle of the night because that's what we did. We ran missions in the middle of the night, and we done roving foot patrols during the day, show of force patrols during the day. You got very little sleep. You're always prepping for something, and you're always keeping. Yeah, it was an experience. But we walked in there and we cleared this house, and we were sitting in there, and I never really paid attention to who we got, you know, or whoever. You know, I was just a Joe, and but there was these grenades. And you could see them like just lined up, six, seven, I don't remember. But they were just sitting there, and they were in between these mattresses. And I thought, and I don't guess he's seen them. I'm not gonna, but he would just start ripping these things looking for weapons, and I'm like, oh shit! And I was like, and then when he done that, I just went like this, and they didn't go off, and I was like, because I thought that all the pins were pulled, and they were just laying on top of the thing, and I was like, boy, that wasn't my last patrol. That was like my first year there or something. Anyway, that was a hair-raising experience. But I never encountered anybody. You know, I've encountered some ruffians, you know, that you might have to take down. But for the most part, no. So, but Sadr City was rough. It was rough. We ended up losing some people pretty bad, and it was a pretty dangerous area. It really tried our patience, you know, and it really soured me because my orders it soured a lot of people. Our orders weren't to exceed, and I was like, I knew it. I'm gonna fucking die over here after I've already done my year, you know. And it's like, what, you know? Where's my star over my CIB? You know, sending me into combat twice, you know, like.
How many tours did you?
I done a year, and then I took that 40-something days off, and then I went back for 3 more months. So I did right at 15 and a half months there. Okay. But it was 2 separate things. And then we went back home, and then I went back to Germany, and I had a lot of problems after that. I drank a lot. I did. And I drank a lot, and I went to the 101st Airborne, and then I got out of the military because I got in some trouble. I was fighting and drinking and that, carrying on. I still got an honorable discharge, but you know, I got out as a specialist. You know, I got busted back from sergeant, but I was a 20-year-old E5. I didn't know how to deal with. They didn't know how to unwind us, you know. And we went to reintegration training, and hell, all we did was drink all night long. You know what I mean? Show up, and I had something horrible to say, but I mean, it happens to soldiers all the time. And I drank myself. I drank, and I got out. And
when were you discharged?
September 26, 2005. So I did just a little over 3 years. And
what have you done since you got your discharge?
I went straight to work in the oil field. Started doing that, and I worked myself up to driller. And then I got out of the oil field, and then I actually got a divorce. My wife divorced. She done me pretty wrong, and then I got a divorce, and that took me a while to get out of. I went off I wouldn't say on the deep end, but it really affects you when you had the rug pulled out from underneath you, and you just didn't know anything. And that was how mine went.
When did you come to Bartlesville?
I came here the first time a year ago, and I come and stay with my brother. He moved here 2 or 3 years ago, and then I came here and stayed the summer, or not the summer, like a month, because I hadn't seen my brother in a while, and I wanted to come and see him and see his new house, and then I left, and then I came back down again a few months ago, and then I went back up there, and then so within this year, okay.
Would you join the Army again?
Yes, I would. Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to do word association. I'll give you some words and you give me a reaction.
Okay.
First one is basic training.
Structure.
Bomb holder.
Bomb holder. I just the heels. Yeah, there's the rolling heels are associated. Beautiful terrain. Kuwait. Densely populated and rich.
Iraq.
The birthplace of civilization.
Iskendron.
Foxhole.
Fallujah.
2 hours on, 2 hours off.
Cedar City.
Indirect fire.
Sniper.
Move.
George Bush.
Knows stuff that his daddy told him. And I think that's why I just don't think the American people can handle the fact that that's why we were there.
Mm-hmm. How do you want to be remembered?
I wanted to go out in a blaze of glory, like all grunts do, be buried. I was going to be buried in Arlington. How do I want to be remembered? As somebody who tried, gave it his all, promoted. I'm always a strong believer in promoting the military, and my father was in the military. My grandfather was in the military. His older brother was in the military. My mom's dad was in Korea. His older brother was injured in D-Day when he was on an anti-aircraft thing, and he was buried in Tupper Lake, New York. Their dad was in World War One. I never met them. My grandpa died before I was only 4 when he died, and he's buried in Mountain Home, Idaho. He was a full bird colonel. He retired from the Air Force. That's how I was part of history. You only get to invade a country so many times.
This is an excellent interview.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for your service and thank you for the interview.
Thank you very much. I laugh about boy, one thing about Drill Sergeant Disk is he had the bluest eyes I'd ever seen before in my life, and he could be the meanest person and sound so sincere while doing it. But I remember I let him. My mom and stepdad showed up there. My mom was a single mom. And then she married, and then I moved out with my brother. When I was a senior in high school, I didn't get along with stepdad. He wasn't like anything like I just didn't get along with him. So I moved out, thought I was an adult, which I wasn't.
Anyway, today is December 21st, 2020. My name is Joe Todd. This has been an interview with Josh Morrison in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Thank you.
Thank you.
Man,